Welcome back to the Word on Fire Show. I'm Matthew Petrusik, Senior Director of the Word on Fire Institute and the host of the Word on Fire Show. Thank you for joining us. Depression and anxiety have exploded in the past decade in the United States, especially, though not exclusively, among young people. According to the CDC, for example, half of all adults between 18 and 24 reported symptoms of anxiety and depression. Unfortunately, these are not just temporary negative feelings that people can easily shake off. Tragically, anxiety and depression frequently contribute to suicide and suicide attempts, with young men in particular taking much of the brunt of this epidemic of self-harm. Many suffer in silence, with neither family members nor friends aware of their mental, spiritual, and sometimes even physical anguish. Perhaps some of those watching and listening right now are yourselves in the dark. Perhaps someone you love is. So what can we do both individually and collectively to reintroduce hope, purpose, and peace, perhaps even joy, into the lives of those who are feeling lost? What in particular can both Catholic belief and practice offer? As it turns out, a lot. Here to help us discuss the problem of depression and anxiety and to offer 5 ways that a life of faith can help free us from its grips is Bishop Robert Barron. Welcome back to the studio, Bishop.
Thanks, Matt. Always good to be with you.
So today we're talking about, it's a difficult, very difficult topic, in fact, but it's within a hopeful horizon. We're looking at the epidemic of depression and anxiety, but how, also at the same time, how a life of faith can help liberate those who are in the grip of its darkness.
Yeah, okay.
But before we jump into that, what have you been up to recently?
Recently, we had Catholic Schools Week in our diocese, which I love. And I usually go around, we have a big diocese geographically, and I go all over the place to schools and have mass with the kids usually, and then lunch with them, and maybe some like Q&A time. And I always enjoy doing that. One of my schools, I went to had mass and had lunch, and the kids told me, we juggle here. And I said, what do you mean? From the time we're in first grade, we learn how to juggle. And I said, well, gosh, I'd love to see that. So they got the kids, almost all of them, out on the gym floor. And sure enough, they're juggling beautifully, and with basketballs and with hoops. And then at one point, they get on skateboards, and then they're juggling on the skateboards. So pretty good, I thought. But it's always a joy to make those visits.
What school is that?
It was the one in, oh gosh, I'm going to blank now. It was in Adams.
In Adams. Is that Sacred Heart?
I think Sacred Heart. Yeah, I'm trying to remember the name of the school, but it was a great experience.
Well, that's remarkable.
Yeah.
Well, let's now turn to the topic. To establish some context for the discussion, really to communicate its urgency, it's important to recognize that depression and anxiety, as you well know, are at record levels in the United States.
Yeah.
I didn't know as the scientist. I did a little research for the show. According to the CDC, half of young adults, between 18 and 24, report on a regular basis suffering from depression and anxiety. And it's also,
that's
of course,
higher than I thought, actually.
Yeah, I was shocked by that. I would have assumed maybe 25%.
Yeah.
But it's half, according to the CDC. And of course, it's a leading contributing cause to suicide and attempted suicide. And here's one more troubling statistic. Close to 18% of the adult population, so close to 1 in 5, are on antidepressants now in the United States. So, Bishop, I know you're roughly aware of these statistics, but have you been seeing this also at the pastoral level in the work you're doing on the ground?
Yeah, and of course, I'm chair of the Bishop's Committee on Laity, Youth, Marriage, and Family Life. And one of the innovations when I became chair, I said, let's talk about this mental health crisis in our country, especially among young people. And the bishops responded very enthusiastically because they all know from our pastoral work how prevalent this is. And yeah, I've noticed it, man, I'd say in the course of my priesthood, I've noticed the intensification, especially among young people. It's always been around in some form, but the prevalence of it. And and so it's definitely on the minds of the bishops that we have to address this. One of the issues we're facing is among counselors and psychologists and psychiatrists, relatively few have a robustly Catholic anthropology. So you're trying to address these issues psychologically, but they're always related to, who I am as a person, what my ultimate goal is in life and all that. So they're related to spiritual matters. But yeah, I've noticed the increase in it.
Do you have any sense, even anecdotally, about why why this is happening?
That's the question, isn't it? Many point to social media because you want to look at, what are some differentials? What differentiates today from, let's say, 40, 50 years ago? And that's one thing. And I get it. It was Gene Twenge who studied this stuff very carefully, who said there's a tight correlation statistically between screen time and depression. And I totally buy that, even from my own experience. All these machines, as we know now, are designed to addict us. And we're all, to varying degrees, addicted to them. One of my resolutions, by the way, this Lent, is one day a week, put the phone away completely. Wow. And it's hard.
Yeah.
And we bring our, the guys now that enter the seminary have to go through what we call the propedeutic year, this kind of preparatory year. They all say the most important part of it is we compel them to put the phones away and the technology away for a year. They can check like for emergency calls and all that, but they can't be on those machines. So I think there's a lot to that. Not the whole answer, but the correlation between screen time and this locking into this little self-contained world. The image of all of us roughly in the same space, but all looking at our phones and not talking to each other. That's a recipe for disaster psychologically.
I know our viewers and listeners will want to know your answer to this. Have you seen a change in the seminarians when they have to spend that year away from technology?
Yes, and they all say, almost to a person, that was the most important part of the propedeutic year.
Wow.
And we're teaching them that year, how to pray, and we bring them through the Vatican II documents or through the catechism, various things. But and I get it. I understand it. They'll say the most important thing was putting the phone away. I often will tell, I'm of a certain age now, and I'll tell people, there actually was a time in the distant past when we didn't have these things.
Yeah.
I got my first cell phone. I remember I was 45, and it was after a really bad trip. I went to I should rephrase, it wasn't like an LSD trip. It was a really bad journey to Oakland to give a talk to priests, and the guy wasn't there to meet me, and I didn't know how to find him, and I was going in a phone book to try to call. And when I got home, I thought, all right, I need to get one of these newfangled, cell phones.
Time, yeah.
But, I was 45, so most of my life. And then Facebook and Instagram, none of that stuff. So there was this sort of magical time when it didn't exist. And it's hard for a lot of us even to imagine it now because we're so addicted. But it's caused a lot of mischief.
Yeah, they are addictive. So we'll turn to the 5 ways that faith can help break the grip of anxiety and depression. Before we do, let's dig a little bit deeper into sort of a secular understanding of the problem, which sort of by definition is going to say this is just a psychological issue that we have to deal with. So in principle, Bishop, do you think that exclusively non-religious tools, non-spiritual tools, we could even say, like medications, self-care exercises, and having a therapist alone, so we're not saying those are bad, but alone, can they really address the problem?
No, not ultimately. And again, I agree with you, and I want to stress that these can all be very good and very helpful things to people. And some people really need them to get through, crisis times. And so I don't want to be seen in any way as bad-mouthing it. I'm a Jungian in this regard. Jung said, the co-founder of psychoanalysis, said, at bottom, all psychological problems are spiritual problems. Mm-hmm. I've always felt that's dead right.
Yeah.
Now, he had a certain peculiar view, you might say, of the spiritual, but he's right about that at bottom, because ultimately we're grounded in God and we're destined for union with God. Our heart is restless till it rests in thee. That's the basic statement of Catholic anthropology, and it's right. So it doesn't mean you leap immediately to the spiritual and jump over the psychological. No, because grace builds upon nature. So nature has to be addressed in different ways. But at bottom, psychological problems are spiritual problems. So to get us into right relationship to ultimate reality. Here's another thing from the psychological tradition I think is really right. What gets you in touch with reality is always therapeutic. Mm-hmm. That in a way, all of our struggles come from a disassociation from reality. In some way, I'm living in a delusion, or I'm deceived, or I'm exaggerating, or I'm saying, what gets you in touch with reality is therapeutic. Well, who's God? Aquinas says God is the ens realissimum. He's the most real thing. The most real thing of all is God. And so when I'm in touch with God, that's the most healing place to be. So much of therapy is trying to do that, trying to get people in touch with, no, look, the way you're thinking, that's weird. That's a weird road you've gone down. That's not right. Get onto the right road of understanding your parents or your friendships or whatever it is. Reality. God is the ens realissimum.
Mm-hmm.
And so getting in touch with God is the most therapeutic move ultimately.
Would it be important potentially to add having the right conception of God?
Of
that
course,
we get in
yeah.
touch. You've heard the term, I'm sure, therapeutic deism
Yeah.
is the kind of reigning theology of our age. That
Right.
doesn't seem to have helped the issue.
No. Yeah, that's right. Because again, ens realissimum, you got the wrong understanding of God. You're apart from reality.
Mm-hmm.
But that God is a healing presence for sure. Look at Jesus the healer. It's very important, isn't it? Yes, he heals people physically, but anytime people were with Jesus, there are a couple of exceptions, the rich young man being one, but practically anytime you're with Jesus, you're healed at some level. Think of the people on the road to Emmaus.
Yeah.
Anybody. Think of all the forgiven sinners. You're healed at some level by your contact with him.
Mm-hmm.
That's the spiritual life, And see, think of it as a nesting thing. The psyche isn't like over here and then the spirit's over here. Think of the psyche as kind of nesting in the spiritual and then the body nesting, as it were. So they're all connected to each other. C.S. Lewis talks about the interconnected rings, the ring that connects me to God, and then that's connected to the soul, which is connected to the body, right? And what can happen is you lose the connection to God, the other ones become like demagnetized and they start to fall apart.
Yeah.
That's another really good image, I think, that applies both spiritually and psychologically is integration, disintegration. The masters all talk about the integrating quality of a right relationship to God. It draws things together. That's the rose window, right? At the center is Christ, and then all of it drawn together around him. Concomitantly, if you fall out of right relation to the ultimate reality, then everything else tends to fall apart. That's what the suffering soul often looks like. What do you have to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? Because it's the disintegrated self.
Right.
And so a lot of psychotherapy is meant to knit people back together in a way, to bring the elements of yourself into some kind of harmony. Well, ultimately, that's a harmony around God. Here's a story. This goes back to years ago when I was doing full-time pastoral ministry. A guy came to me, didn't know him from Adam, and he didn't tell me much about himself. He just said, I want to learn how to pray better. I'm not good at it. How do you pray? So I just took him through the Our Father and talked about some of the basic moves there, and I said, how about try every day at a certain point, morning or night, whatever's good for you, is find put a crucifix up in your room or something and focus on that and really pray this Our Father. It's simple, kind of centering or contemplative type prayer. He came back a couple of weeks later and almost without introduction, he said to me, I got to stop having promiscuous sex. And I didn't know him. He never talked about his sex life in any way. And I said, yeah, I agree with you. But the point is, it was that discipline of prayer that did something to him. It told him, yeah, that part of your life is disintegrated. That part is not making sense. And you got to bring that back, right? That's how it works.
Yeah.
That if you pray and you get yourself centered in God, you start to knit yourself back together.
It's a remarkable story. So we'll turn to these sort of five other paths in just a moment. But you noted that technology has had a aggravating influence on anxiety and depression. What about sort of secularism and secularize itself? In particular, secular culture tells us that we should not be engaged in self-harm, that it's here to help, while also telling us that euthanasia is a great good and we're the autonomous self and we are free to do that at any time we choose. Do you think these kinds of incongruities in the culture itself are also part of the problem?
Yeah. I mean, secularism, I've often called it a soul-suffocating secularism.
Yeah.
Or it's Taylor's, buffered self. I'm buffered from connection to the transcendent. And what that does is it just suffocates me because I'm meant to fly upward and outward to God. And if you say, well, there's no God, there's no purpose, there's no meaning, you've come from nowhere, what does, Dawkins say? We're in this pitiless, universe that has no purpose, no meaning. You don't find that depressing? That's not going to depress your whole being? Well, of course it will. Because, see, we're not meant for that. And the soul knows that. And if you're being told all the time, no, this world, imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us, only sky. I find that's the most depressing stanza I can imagine. That means I'm just stuck in this suffocating little world of, my ordinary experience, and where my heart wants to lead me, where there's nothing real there. It's just emptiness. Yes, that's why the collapse of religion, and more to it, the collapse of organized religion and disciplined spiritual activity, like going to Mass or going to church. Why was it before, let's say, 1960 or so, most of our country went to church on Sunday? It's amazing now to think about it, but they did. The only place you see it, I think, on television is The Simpsons. On The Simpsons, almost everyone in the town goes to church.
That's true. That's right. I never thought
they're
about
all
that.
there.
Yeah.
But that's not true in America anymore. It was true, like when my parents were young, it was true. That's going to affect you in a very negative way, because church, it's boring, I don't want to go. It was having an effect on you because it was ordering you toward a transcendent good. And maybe you're not paying attention every minute. Who cares? You were in this place, and with your body, you were acting out this relationship to God, and you were surrounded by the angels and saints, and you were at the Mass that was lifting you up to the sacrifice of Christ and all that. Oh, take that away. I never go to Mass. I never think about the saints or the angels. I never hear the word of God. I never sing with my fellow believers in imitation of the angels. I never do any of that anymore. What's going to happen? I'll sink into a depression, I'm just back to Richard Dawkins's remorseless, pitiless, empty universe. So, yeah. And that's why we religious leaders have to reassert ourselves. And we fell into a sort of hand-wringing, loss of confidence for all kinds of reasons. We got to overcome that and take leadership again in the culture.
Well, let's look at those 5 ways now on that foundation. So the first is that having faith frees us from the illusion of total control over our lives, shifting the fundamental question we ask from what should I do with my life to what does God want of me?
Yeah.
So, Bishop, say a little bit more about what the shift of perspective, what you've oftentimes described as a shift from the ego drama to the theodrama, how that can really be helpful in getting us out of the dark.
Well, that's called conversion, right? That's metanoia. Go beyond the mind you have, metanous. That's where that word comes from, which I think is very important to think about. It doesn't first mean like moral conversion. It means go beyond the whole mentality that you have, which would be the ego drama. My life's about me. It's about my choice, my freedom, what I want. And we hear that all the time from the culture, that idea. It's suffocating. And that's quite right. It's not what I want. Who cares what you want? It's what God wants for you, which is always better than what you want, But you have to undergo a conversion to come to that point. And now read the Gospels with that in mind. They left everything and followed him. She put down the water jug and went into the city to proclaim him. The rich young man couldn't make that move. He couldn't, and he went away sad, right? They're all telling that same story of how to get out of this suffocating ego drama into the real excitement of the theodrama, which is following the promptings of God. And that's faith. That's a life of faith. That's a good way to define it.
That's right. So the second way is that faith can help us. The second way that faith can help us is that it offers us metaphysical hope and not only psychological hope.
Yeah.
How does that help us get us out of the dark?
Hope, as we said, we had a session on hope, didn't we?
Right.
It's the ordering your life to a transcendent end or transcendent good beyond this world. If my hopes are only within this world, I'm the most pathetic we're the most pathetic of men, Paul says. Well, that's the secularist view, that my hopes are only within this world. So the pleasure I can get, the power I can accrue, the status I can reach, bore me to death with that. I mean, that's a very narrowing of the soul. But hope orients me to a transcendent good. And that's exciting. That means I can see the goods of this world, but in relation to a much higher, more enticing good, which is beyond my grasp, and I have to kind of surrender to it. That's exciting. That's adventure. See, the spiritual life is a life of adventure. It's the secularist life that is boring. And I'm a cool guy. I'm a secularist. No, you're not cool. You're boring as all get out, and you'll become bored in your life. It's the person of faith who's like, I'm getting on this ship that I'm heading out to the open sea, and I don't quite know where it's going, but I'm under the direction of a captain. That's the life that you want. That's not a depressing, boring life.
Authentic adventure. Yeah. As you know, when people are in the pit of depression, oftentimes your feelings of hopelessness are so real. But what does the Christian conception of hope say to someone whose feelings are totally in the dark?
Right. And again, it's that distinction, isn't it? I mean, feelings are good. And I'm enough of a follower of Dietrich von Hildebrand to affirm the importance of feelings. They're not just something I should get rid of or like Plato, just move above all that. No, your feelings are important. They're part of your life and they're telling you something. But you can't be just a slave of your feelings, because your feelings sometimes are ordered in the right way. Sometimes they're not. And if they're moving you away from the right moral and spiritual direction, then they're a problem. And then they have to be kind of disciplined. The way a good parent disciplines his kids who want to eat candy right now, but that's not good for you. So that's why we have to discipline our feelings. Not eliminate them or run from them, but discipline them and order them properly.
Yeah.
So order them toward authentic, as you say, metaphysical hope.
Mm-hmm. The third way faith can help us is that it moves us to focus on the here and now rather than to worry about the future. And here our Lord's words in Matthew 6 come to mind, in which he tells his followers not to worry about tomorrow, but to focus on today, being assured the Lord will provide. And of course, as you know, one of the most common themes is be not afraid. So, Bishop, how should we understand that sort of command that Christ gives us? Be not afraid when we do feel so much fear sometimes.
Right. This friend of mine who was done pastoral ministry for a long time was dealing with a lady who had crippling insomnia. She could not get to sleep. Right. Wow. Tried everything, psychological pills, everything. And finally, he was talking to her. He said, before you go to sleep at night, I want you to say, I am not God. I am not God. I'm not in charge of the universe. I don't know everything about everything. God is in charge of the universe, and I'm not God. So relax. When you deny God, either explicitly or implicitly, well, the danger is you move into that space. You become God. I've got to be in complete control of my own life. Well, you're not. Get over it. You're not. God's in control. Lord, I trust in you. That great prayer of faith. I trust in you. Or Merton's famous prayer that everybody loves. My Lord God, I have no idea where I'm going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I don't know where it's going to end. Nor do I know if I'm following your will. But I believe the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I know if I do this, you will lead me on the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore will I trust you always, even though I may seem lost in the shadow of death. I'm reciting part of the prayer. But that's the move. I don't know where I'm going. But I'm not God. I shouldn't expect that I know where I'm going. But I trust in you. That line from Isaiah, the blind I will lead on their journey. By paths unknown I will guide them. I've always found great peace in that line. It comes up in the office regularly. Mm-hmm. The blind I will lead on their journey. I'm blind when it comes to the deepest things. I don't know where I'm going. Even tomorrow. I could be dead tomorrow. I could be transferred somewhere tomorrow. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm not in control of tomorrow. Yeah. Before you go to sleep at night, say, I'm not God. But I trust in God. That's the move.
The classic Marxist critique is that what religion and Christianity does is it casts our attention to the future. What you're saying is that the Christian life, we're deeply embedded in the present.
Yeah, and with a legitimate sense of the future hope, But yeah, and that's true in a lot of the spiritual masters is the living in the present moment, and that's true, both East and West, both Christian, non-Christian. You can find that motif of I can't control the future, I can't control the past. It's done. all I can do is live now, live in this moment. And that's Jesus again, right? Saying, don't care about tomorrow. Trust, that's faith. See, pistis in Greek, we think of it very sometimes notionally. To have faith is to accept certain doctrines. And it does have that derivative sense. But in its primary sense, pistis in Greek means trust, I think. Trust, confidence. I have trust in God. And I live my life that way.
So the fourth way that faith can help us get out of anxiety and depression is it helps us to focus on the other's good rather than our own. So say a little bit about how this radical orientation to the other is not only a part of the Christian life, but how it's helpful to get us out of the dark.
Yeah, and it's related to our last conversation, isn't it? Because if I love God, I have faith in God, then I love what God loves. That means everybody else. And so love your neighbor. And so I get out of it. See, here's something Jordan Peterson said I think is dead right. He said, misery and self-consciousness are equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
That when I'm aware of myself, I'm miserable ipso facto. Because it's this turning, it's Augustine's curvatus in se. Sin is to be caved in on myself. What am I going to do? I'm looking. Where the outward move. And I found that in my life. As I've lived now for a little while, and of course you go through ups and downs. It's always go out, give yourself to something, do something, go out. Stop this fussy self-preoccupation. And when Peterson said it, I thought, right. Self-conscious, self-preoccupation is equivalent to misery.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, William F. Buckley's line about industry is the enemy of melancholy. And I think it's kind of making the same point in a way. Now, we'd say, he's a workaholic. But it's just that idea of, okay, if you're melancholic, you're depressed, get busy, do something. Industry is the enemy of melancholy.
Yeah, there's very strong empirical evidence now that shows just that the less you think about yourself, the overall happier you are.
And that's one of the basic intuitions of Christianity, right?
Yeah.
And to love, will the good of the other, go out from yourself, right? And then see what happens, you expand. This move is always the cramped. I love Augustine's definition there. Curvatus in se, I'm caved in around myself. That's hell. If you want to, fire is a symbol of it and all that, or ice in Dante. They're symbols. But what hell is that. It's being caved in on myself. That's why in Lewis's thing, remember his image of hell is this city that just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger because everyone just wants to spread out. Oh, get away from these people. Go farther away. And the city just keeps expanding. No one's working together. No one's coming together to harmonize. It's like, oh God, oh my goodness, let me get away. So the city keeps getting bigger and bigger. That's hellish.
And the fifth way faith can help is that it liberates us from the terror of death and the ultimate insignificance of our worldly accomplishments. There is a heaven. There is an afterlife. How does that help those who are in the pit now?
Yeah, no, that's good. You think of that sort of the Pascalian thing that I can just be crushed by these infinities that surround me, the infinite space, and then the infinite time before I was born, and then there's infinite time after I die, and I'm just like in this little tiny space. No, but faith orients you to another world, not to denigrate this one, but this one is seen now sacramentally. That's the way I like to put it. The Platonic mistake is to say, oh no, it's a fallen world, just get away from it. Or some forms of more radical Christianity, that it's just fallen and compromised, and I just want to get to heaven as quickly as possible. I think the Catholic view is to see this world as sacramental. It's full of hints and signs. In its own truth and beauty and goodness, it signals ultimate truth, beauty, and goodness. So we live in it sacramentally, liturgically, and so we cling to it lightly. If you say, this is everything that I want. No, it's a sacrament of what I want. It's a sign.
Mm-hmm.
So that's Teresa of Avila, it's like it's a bad night in a bad hotel. That's putting it somewhat more negatively. But, okay, it's a hotel, and it's all right. It's decent enough place to stay, but don't get too comfortable here. This is not what you're really ultimately meant for. But I would say sacramentally. And that's the great artists, the Michelangelos and Dantes and T.S. Eliot's. That's what they saw, and their poetry and their art reflected that. They became heightened sacramental signs, if you want. It's like David. We look at Michelangelo's David. Well, it's an idealized humanity, and it's meant to signal the transfigured body, the spiritual body that we'll have in heaven, right? So I read the world sacramentally, and then you'll be much happier.
Before we turn to our listener question, it's also important to note that within the great spiritual tradition, we have this area of dark mysticism. For example, we see a figure like St. John of the Cross.
Yeah.
So help us understand, Bishop, sort of the difference between that kind of darkness, spiritual darkness, which potentially can be productive, maybe even salvific, and sort of a run-of-the-mill depression.
Right. And of course, the famous dark night of the soul hasn't a thing to do with depression. It's used in that sort of casual way, I'm in the dark night of the soul. No. See, John of the Cross, he's Mr. Nada, 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 right? Nothing, nothing, nothing. But it doesn't make him some kind of nihilist. What he's doing there is saying you have to be detached from the goods of this world in order to make the great journey, which reorients the whole soul toward God. Then you can re-inhabit this world much more joyfully. But first you got to go through the purgation of the nada, nada, nada. So the dark night of the senses would be detachment from the visible and physical world. The dark night of the soul is a detachment even from those higher like concepts and ideas and so on. So it's not a falling into depression. Oh, I'm in my dark night. No, it's a liberating detachment. I put it that way. That's the dark mysticism of John of the Cross. But it's meant ultimately it's affirming of God, of course, but then of all things in relation to God.
Yeah.
But once you're free of them, they don't have this hold over you. Unless I get that position, unless I get that much money, unless they love me, no, forget all that. Nada, nada, nada. That stuff means nothing. Don't worry about it. Worry about God and doing God's will. And what does Jesus say? And the rest will be given unto you, right?
Yeah.
So seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. That's it. Then you'll get the rest in right order and proportion, Now, I don't really care if I get that job that meant so much to me. That money that I thought was the key to my happiness. What does Paul say? It's so much rubbish now. See, that's the dark night, is when you can, in a liberating way, say, so much rubbish, all the stuff that I worried about. But now I can re-inhabit it beautifully.
Yeah, liberating is the right word there.
Right.
And finally, Bishop, how about some practical advice for those who may be listening right now who are in the dark? What are some things that you would advise they do today to help move in the right direction?
Well, one thing, when people come online, and I'm always reluctant to give advice online because, I don't know the person.
Yeah, right, yeah.
But when I feel it is always safe to say, and I get it quite a bit when people say I'm depressed, my life's going nowhere, I'm suicidal or whatever it is. I'll usually urge them, talk to somebody, talk to a counselor and so on. But then my advice is perform today, start today, and then every other day, perform the simplest act of love. And then I say love means to will the good of the other. Find some way. You're in the depth of depression, but find some way. It's an email to someone that you know is lonely. It's a smile. This is Teresa of Lisieux, right? It's a smile to someone who annoys you, maybe, but as a little act of love.
Yeah.
It's the smallest thing, but every day, and then you'll find that starts giving you joy, and then you want to do more and more of that. But every day in the beginning, perform one act of love. I'm going to write a check for $50 to a charity. Yeah. Okay. It's someone on the street begging for money. Give them $10. It's a kid that needs help in school. Sit down and help them with their homework. I don't know what it is. I don't care what it is. Some act of love. And I've said to people, I guarantee you, more light will come into your life in that simple act.
And you do it no matter how you feel, right?
Yeah, right. And then it's that Václav Havel thing that once you stand in the light of the truth, that circle gets a little bit bigger and someone joins you in it, and then it gets bigger, and someone else joins you and it gets bigger. Love is like that too. That circle of light gets bigger and bigger.
Let's now turn to our listener question. So today we have Michelle from New York asking about what she can do to help get her 3 sons back to church.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Michelle. I'm from Westchester County, New York. I'd like to ask Bishop Barron, besides praying daily, what can I do to help return my 3 sons and their families to the church? They were all raised Catholic, have received all the sacraments, but do not attend church. It breaks my heart.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thanks for that question. I totally get it. And you're in the same boat with a lot of, Catholic parents and grandparents. Here's a real practical thing. Get Brandon Vought's book called Return. Brandon is our head of publishing at Word on Fire, wrote a nice little book called Return, and it's addressing exactly what you're talking about. I'll say a couple of simple things. One is, don't be afraid to broach the subject with your sons. You're at a family gathering or something. I know it's tough talking about religion, but something like, have you ever thought of coming back to Mass? Or would you like to come with us for the Christmas Mass? Broach it explicitly. And then if you get any kind of blowback or resistance, invite a question. Say, hey, tell me, what's the one reason you're not coming to Mass? I don't want to talk about it. No, but how about just give me one? Give me one reason why. And then at the very least, something will open up, a path or an opportunity for further conversation. Or maybe then you can say, well, there's a good book that sort of answers that. Or here's a video I know of that might be helpful to you. But so make the invitation and then ask the question and see what happens. Because in a way, you got nothing to lose. At this point, if the kids are staying away from Mass completely and it's not good, what do you have to lose? Broach it in a sort of open spirit and ask them, what's one reason why you're not coming to Mass? I'd recommend that.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle, for reaching out to us. If you would like to ask Bishop Barron a question for a future Word on Fire show, please visit askbishopbarron.com. That's askbishopbarron.com. And as always, we really do love to hear from you. Bishop, we're at the end of another great conversation. I know many will find this consoling and hopeful.
I think it's an important topic, for a lot of people.
Thank you. That does it for us today. Thanks for joining us on the Word on Fire show. If you're interested in learning more about how Word on Fire can help you grow closer to Christ, become a better evangelist with and for others, and work for the common good, consider joining the Word on Fire Institute. Check us out at institute.wordonfire.org. That's institute.wordonfire.org. We'll see you next time.